Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and along with me, as always, is my esteemed colleague, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing very well, Dr. Dave.
Most excellent. As you may or may not know, the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast is your personal, professional, and career development podcast. And today with us, we have a very special guest, Dr. Katherine Adamson. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Dr. Dave and Dr. Joe. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Most excellent. Yes, we are
Absolutely.
so excited to have you here. Just a little background. Catherine and I went to school together in our doctoral program. We've maintained a friendship over the years, and it's about time we pulled her into the show and had her speak her mind on a
Yeah, you get to
negotiated
hear me
topic.
pontificate.
Pontificate, absolutely. So with that, our topic for today is women in business. And Catherine, we'd like for you to just give us a little bit of a background about yourself and then give us your thoughts on women in business.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So first, thanks for the introduction. A little bit about me. I've been in the corporate world for over 15 years, and spent that time in professional sales. So people often think of sales as something that's I don't know, like the car salesman opening up the back of his trunk or something like that. But I've been in technology sales and currently I sell consulting and I'm in the data and analytics and AI space. So I'm definitely on the edge of hearing about all the evolving trends in business. I get to talk to a lot of different clients, which gives me a little bit of perspective of what's happening in many different organizations and what people are running up against in their professional life. So it's a little bit about where I'm at right now. And as Dave mentioned, we went through our PhDs together. So I sometimes forget all of that learning, but glad to bring it back in for this episode.
So, thank you for that brief introduction. Very impressed. I'm sure it's going to spark many conversations offline between the three of us, if not others. I'm very curious to learn more about that. But for today, again, our topic is women in business. We thought it would be a wonderful topic to discuss, a wonderful time to discuss it with what's going on in the social and cultural climate. So, um, what can you tell us about women in business?
Yeah, it's I think it's a very relevant topic right now. I know there's been conversations about it for a number of years. I feel like the women before me have made a lot of strides in how they are viewed in the business world. But I definitely think there's still challenges in a woman's place in the business world and what that means. And I think that comes down to maybe a couple different areas. One, as we look to have more equity in how women are viewed, that is happening maybe further in some areas of a corporation than maybe other areas. So I often work in IT and in data organizations where maybe there's a little bit more struggle because there's just not as many women. There just tends to be more men, since it's STEM, and maybe women have progressed more in something like HR. But that also is that's also an assumption about women should succeed maybe more in a different type of role in an organization than another type of role. So I think it's definitely where women are located and the culture that they're in. I think also just we were talking about the subconscious nature of how like what role a woman should play. So, traditionally kind of the
Right.
very traditional role of a woman in a home translates to how a woman is viewed in the business world. So we could dig into that a little bit and my thoughts around that. And then I just think women in themselves, how they view themselves in the world, is something that we have to
Mhm.
think about. It's not just how others treat us, but how do we ourselves position who we are and what does that look like? There's a lot of different opinions on how a woman should be, and I think that's something that we is really important to understand as well. So we could
Yeah,
dig into that too.
yeah, that's a great start. I like what you said about being conscious and really thinking about what you're saying, what you're wanting, what you're doing as it refers to the workplace and your own career. Um, Obviously, everyone has a different some common and some different struggles throughout their careers and their personal lives. And as we start dissecting culture into different pieces, it can really tend to magnify what's really going on. So more people become more aware of what really happens and what really is going on instead of, oh, that happened, lift up the rug, sweep it outside, and smooth it over and paint, and it's fine. Everything's fine. And it's not. I've been in workplaces where there's a positive attitude towards female employees, and I've been in some environments where it's the absolute opposite, over the years. And to me, it's kind of alarming because I don't think we should be judged upon what our physical appearance is or our gender. I think we should be judged on our character and our performance. I mean, it sounds silly, but we really that's not that we need to stay focused on what the objective is, and that's the equity and inclusion piece, because there are groups that are underrepresented.
That, well, and I just reflected on when Catherine said, like HR, typically women, and I'm actually in HR right now, my current organization, and I did a just kind of count in my head, and she's correct. I mean, out of the 100+ people we have in HR, there's definitely a larger number of women there where we could probably count as many men on two hands that's in our department. And then you also said something about with STEM in relation to IT and those types of things. That again, that's still male dominated, and still I could only imagine that when women look at those type of careers, they're like, well, I don't see myself in that career field or that organization because it's mainly male dominated. And I was at a conference this past week, and those were some of the experiences that some of the individuals that were on panels were sharing with people, that they just one young lady said that she was the only one in her entire department. And so it just, yeah, still, some of these women are being brave and just pushing through those barriers or potential problems that may arise, but they're doing it. But it's still just not enough women out there for other young women or younger ladies to say, hey, that's an opportunity for me, I'm going to try that. So yeah, it's still today, we're still looking at that again, still having male and female roles that we should not still be using as identifiers for where your career goes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, Joe, you said an important point there, especially like the role model of women in business.
Mhm.
So, um, you know, I personally I think women should pursue their options. So if their option in the sense is they want to raise a family and that's what they want to dedicate their life to. I love it. I have
Right.
really good
Yeah.
friends who do that. Right. And I sometimes I wish that was me and I wasn't like dealing with all the stress of the corporate life, but that's not the path I've chosen. But I think
Right.
young girls should also have the options to choose other things and have women who've gone before them, just as women have gone before me and set the stage and opened up, opportunities for me. We should be setting the stage to open up opportunities
Right.
for the other generations too.
Yeah.
I think the challenge really comes in you know the going back to that subconscious piece, like where is it acceptable for women to be in the corporate world and where is it not? And that is a very, I think everyone, in our current culture, most people would say, oh, women should be accepted everywhere, but subconsciously we kind of bucket women out into those
Right.
kind of roles like we talked about, like HR, IT.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of the example of doc registered nurse versus doctor, or physician.
Mm,
That stereotype from many, many years ago, I think is still an interesting example. There's a story about, and I don't remember how exactly it goes. Someone was in an accident, and they cannot be the child's doctor because there's something, and it has to do with the misperception of roles. And
mm,
it the subconscious piece kind of fascinates me because um, it's been around for so long, and it baffles me that we still have that among other cultural divides. But with women too, it's like, why do we still have this? What year, what century are we in? It's
Yeah.
I mean, and to Joe's point and your point, or your point and Joe's point, the STEM aspect, I think that's a wonderful program, but I believe there needs to be more done about that, to bring it to light and make it a socially accepted norm, and
Yeah.
equalize and balance the environment. I remember when I was working for one company, one of my colleagues, I what is an engineering firm, and I end of the day, and I'm walking by, and she was in tears. I'm like, what's wrong? She goes, I have so much work to do. I'm going to have to be here all weekend. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, my boss, they just keep putting more and more on my plate. I said, there's a point she goes, and I just want to do really well. And I'm like, there's a point of doing really well and being taken advantage of. You need to tell your boss that this
Right.
workload is way too much because no one else is doing what you're doing. So you shouldn't have to either. And so,
Yes.
that's the kind of thing that I've observed in my career that I think is just totally unacceptable, in the workplace.
Well, I
Yeah.
just had that conversation today with a gentleman. We are eating lunch, and he brought up that same thing that, sometimes you're given that opportunity, but at what cost? Because now the expectation is that you go above and beyond what your peers are doing, or the requirement for them. So
You have a
yeah, it's that
different
double
norm than
standard. Yeah,
everyone else.
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
You're
Yeah.
allowed to play, but at what cost? I mean, again, you got to pay
Mm.
150 where everybody else paid $5, to play the game.
Right.
And that's still, like you said, that's still happening. We were just having that conversation today, that's still
Yeah.
a norm out there for some people.
Yeah. That's actually like one of my biggest uh annoyances, but the examples of
Yeah.
Dave, what you just called out was this I and joke, like the pay to play. I like that,
Yeah.
right? But for their women in general are just kind of we're raised, and I want to give an example in a second, but I feel like we're raised to be givers. You're raised to be supportive. You're taught from a child's age to go in and to do what's told of you. And so I think in the workplace, women always say yes. This is a very consistent pattern. They don't say no. And then if they say no, then why are you saying no? Well, I have too much work. Well, you need to get it done. But the men, they say no. Oh, it's leadership. They have a boundary. Oh, they're like they stand up for themselves. Oh, they just have we'll just give him what he wants. And this I've seen many examples of a scenario where the woman, because she performs and because she works, she gets more work just piled on her, and then that's what really creates a work equity. So maybe they hold the same position, but a woman is seen as like the worker bee, where the man is seen as like, how do we get him and promote him, and he's going to be the leader. And I think this goes back in my mind. I've kind of come up with this example. Like if you imagine an elementary school, growing up, it's always like, oh, let's choose the leader of the line. Usually, subconsciously, oh, we'll choose the boys to be the leaders. Oh, you can go aggressive on the sports field. Oh, girls, oh, make sure you come do the like, oh, girl, Sally, come help me with the cupcakes. Or, you
Right.
just maybe
Yep.
naturally
Yep.
segregate the boys and girls into these buckets. Again, I think it's subconscious, but I think we are as women are kind of raised to have this mentality of what can I give, what can I do for others, and then we're kind of shoved in this bucket of overwork.
Right. Yep.
Yeah,
Well,
go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, when we talk about the STEM, and I think I've shared this before on the podcast, but like all three of my kids, I got two boys and one girl, and she's the baby. But when they were picking college classes, and both of my boys said, "Hey, I want to major in math," and so they were afforded that opportunity, no questions asked. My daughter did just as well as her brothers did in high school in math. So when she sat down with her counselors to make math her minor, they said, well, women don't do well in math. And so kind of that wasn't even subconscious. That was just a
Yeah.
blatant statement of you're not as good. And so she
Yeah.
fought it,
Yeah.
and she ended up minoring in math. But it took
Mm.
her that courage for her to say, no, I'm just as good as my brothers. So I
Yeah.
want to do this. But again, in a lot of cases, some women are, maybe not confident enough yet to do that. But
Yeah. Yeah. Or they get so much pushback. Like, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but, a woman. So one of the other things that happens in the corporate world a lot, I feel like, is a woman's voice. So a woman will say something. One, she can never be too aggressive because that's always looked down on. And so that's it. That's also an issue. But she'll say something and it's just takes so much more effort for her voice to be
yeah,
heard, kind of like your daughter. If she had to fight to get her,
yeah,
to get her math minor approved and supported. And then, but if a man says something, it's just like everyone kind of look. All the women do this too. It's not that just men do this. Women
Right.
do the same thing. We just look at the guy. Oh, what's he going to say? Oh, okay, we'll just defer to him, right?
yeah,
And so, like to stand up for your voice and for speaking is really important. But that's a very hard skill to develop, especially if you're not raised that way or you're not consistently put in those situations and it becomes a bigger deal. Like, how do you have to kind of fight to get your voice heard? And that could be setting boundaries for work, that could be getting a raise, that could be, fighting for a promotion, it could be lots of different things. All of those things I've had to use my own voice for and figure out how to do that in a way that is acceptable but
Right.
also like keeps me moving forward too. So
right.
there's a
Yeah,
balance there.
Yeah, I
yeah,
think it's interesting, and unfortunately, I've seen this. I'm not going to say how many times, but it's been more than once in my career where um, I've had a team and they've said, "Dave, you did a great job on this project." I'm like, "It wasn't me, it was my team, and it was her idea, and she led the project." And they're like, "Oh," and it's like, "What do you mean, oh?" It's like, what do you? I don't understand what that "oh" is supposed to mean. And it's always like I said, it baffles me that we have a culture that's still this way because it's not been going on for a few weeks or months or years or even decades. It's been going on for centuries, and it's why, with all the air quotes work that we've done on this topic, why are we still where we are?
yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think that goes. Oh,
I was getting no. Go ahead, please.
I just was gonna say, I think that goes back to that. Like, how do we actually create change within an organization and that self awareness? So, like, if it's so, what's interesting is I've had to do this myself when I'm talking to other women because women kind of adopt the expectations of everyone. So like, oh, wait, I'm asking her, another woman, a woman to a woman, I'm asking her to do something that I should just go ask this guy, but he's going to be like more defensive about it. So I just
Mhm,
don't want to like try and argue to get him to do this. She'll just say yes. So I'll just ask her. But that feeds into it. So it kind of
mhm,
goes back to this. How do we change our behavior? How do we be self-aware? And how do we then figure out how to confront those difficult scenarios very subtly, right? How do we subtly confront those scenarios to not only have like kind of equity in how we treat people, but how we also implement it in our own lives, right? So it's not just making sure it happens in, some guy is treating a girl better or man treating a woman better, but it's how do we promote that? So if I'm in a meeting and I'm seeing that maybe my colleagues who are women aren't speaking up, how do I kind of open up the door to allow them to speak? How do I encourage women? How as a woman do I also promote it? So yeah, I think it goes back to that. How do you like kind of combat the subconscious tendencies?
Yeah, and the question I was gonna ask was, you know, what are some of the challenges that women face, and how do women overcome those challenges in the workplace and in the professional environment
Yeah.
and in their own lives? Because, our topics do permeate all three areas.
I think what's like, I think what's really important is to find someone that you work for who's supportive of you.
yeah,
So I've had very good male managers who've been extremely supportive of me. Managers isn't the right word, leaders, I would say, that
yeah,
have opened up those opportunities for me as well. So I think I would encourage women who are in places where they don't feel valued to find a place where they feel valued. And no place is 100% perfect, right? But
Right.
Right.
to find a place where they can have their voice heard. So I think that's really important, Dave. And that's a challenge, like your leadership. So is your leadership willing to kind of open doors? Um, and then I just think this kind of goes back to why is it still an issue? I just think everyone's really busy and tired and like this I'm just talking to corporate America because that's where I'm at, but everyone is burnout. Like every single person I talk to, all my clients, everyone at work, everyone's just exhausted. And I don't know if that's like kind of long COVID hitting, but I just think taking some time to be intentional about how you're doing the little things, so that like
Mhm.
how am I managing a meeting, how am I managing work expectations for my own team, how am I talking to people, and like how do you then kind of grassroots create some change for your little space in the world, right? And what does that look like? And I think the more women are able to do that for themselves and then be proponents of their team, then people start to adjust, and people start to say like, oh, maybe I should just go ask this guy to do this extra work because he has time, and not the
Mhm.
woman who's working 60 hours a week. We'll ask the guy who's working 30. So, like, how do you kind of balance that out? But I think finding a place you can succeed and then working on some of the little things and just addressing your small little area of the world, I think is a good start.
Well, Dave, I think you brought up a good point or a good action plan. And when you mentioned, you had a team member that was a female or a lady that did something, that you call it out, that
Mhm.
correct people. No, this individual did this work. They deserve the credit.
Right.
So being that ally for, women is huge. And then
Yeah.
the other part of it, and I've been a manager or leader of women on my team, and I supported them and even gone to meetings with them, and people try and talk down. And I, let them know, hey, they're the
Yeah.
expert on this. So I'm going to defer to them. I
Mhm.
want you to hear from them, not me. And so I think that gives them more confidence to somebody's in their corner. Somebody's going to,
Mm-hmm.
be there for them to support them. And I think those are a couple of huge things that we can do, as especially as men, to change the way we look at things or the way we've done it in the past, is to be there to
Mhm.
support uh, everyone. Again, different races,
Yeah.
different nationalities. That's what it's about. Just having someone there to back you up, because your voice is just not loud enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you'd mentioned something, Catherine, about finding a place to succeed, and that
Yeah.
no place is
Yes.
perfect. And we've talked about that in a couple of different ways in previous episodes. That you know, if the square peg round hole is a great ish, it was a great one. It's like if you don't fit, then why are you staying? And if
Yeah.
it's a challenge to leave, then make it a priority to find a way to get out or over or around or through,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
you know there's nothing worse than being in an environment that is just not there to support you or advocate for you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like I said, people, there's mounds of work of on one person's table, and there's two folders on another person's, and it's like, and when you have to start working 2 months in a row, 7 days a week, 12 to 18-hour days, just to get your job done while everyone else is being able to enjoy their time off with a very moderate load, there's a disparity there that needs to be addressed. And you know we all have our roles in our personal lives, and that needs to be considered to a degree. I've been a single parent, I've been divorced. There are circumstances where sometimes that needs to be considered, and it tends to weigh a little bit heavier, more against women that I've seen. Oh, they're doing this, oh, they're doing that, they're never here. It's always the there, and it's like,
Yeah.
what, a guy can call out sick but a woman can't. It's like, and I do take issue with that. So when you said find
Yeah.
a place where you feel where you can succeed, I think that's important, because there are work environments and teams and organizations and companies that are better than others at doing certain things like that.
Yep.
Dave, this highlights one of my little pet peeves about women in the workplace, but I think you called out something very important. Um, like, so there is this kind of perception that women are emotional. And what surprises me is that men are very emotional. They just don't realize it. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like
That's why.
me and
That's why I
my
don't. That's why I don't
female
like.
colleague were like, what's happening?
That's why I don't like to watch dramas. I cry too much.
I know. So, but even that kind of like a woman can't call and say, oh, she's got to take care of the kids or some kind of slight against the family,
Yep.
or, oh, she's just being,
Right. Whatever.
sometime during the month, like that kind of thing. There's comments made all the time about that, but that's actually like women have different physiological things that we have to deal with that sometimes come out differently than they do for men. And so also allowing like women emotional space in the workplace, I think is very important. I mean, I think women need to also, I think everyone needs to decrease drama in the workplace. I think we need to like learn how to manage ourselves well. But I do think there's just needs to be like allowance that everyone is like men and women handle things differently. Men and women are emotionally different. How does that, and that's okay that it comes out differently, and not to like downplay that or shut that down, because there's value in, I think at the end of the day, there's value in both. So we need both men and women. We just can't have women. We need both men and women. And like both men and women bring something different, and it's both bring strengths and weaknesses, and how do we complement each other? I think that's actually the key to it is really how do we complement each other to make an impact in what we're doing.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
Joe and I have talked about diverse teams.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
you don't want to have everyone great at math and no one on the team that doesn't understand the legal side of things or the training side of things. You have to have a team that's diverse to be successful. Go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
And I was just going to say that's really what it comes down to when we're building our teams, or making sure our teams are efficient and effective. It is putting the right team together, regardless of what, if they're male or female. What, if Dave is a crier, then you may need me to be kind of the strong arm to tell him to stop crying. I mean, so you have to have those things, like you said, Catherine, to complement one another. So we do need both. We do need all those differences. That's what makes us better. It's not like Dave said, all of us all like this thing, and so we all go down the same path. But then there's no difference. There's no variance. There's no variable. So that's what we need. So it is important that we acknowledge and embrace all those things to make us better.
Yeah. And I think having both perspectives on a team at a minimum is absolutely necessary because of the dynamics that you had mentioned, Catherine, because of those inherent biases and just attitudes and perceptions that people have. I've seen it all male, all female, in a combination, and I firmly believe that the best teams have a very good balance within a diverse balance within that team. You get many different perspectives instead of just that single white male perspective or that other perspective or that other perspective. It's like you get this combined perspective. And if you've built the team properly and you have enough trust, you can have open, transparent conversations that actually make a result in a much better product. So
Yes. I kind of have this belief that disagreement actually leads to what Dave, you just said, a better outcome. Because it's not like the disagreement just allows you to work out the kinks of things. It allows everyone to kind of say like, wait, what about this or what about that? And how do you then come together and then create? You just have to know how to work through the disagreement. And I think that's actually a skill we have to develop as a culture is how do you have disagreement and then, or different perspectives and still come to an outcome that's like best for the organization. So, something else for us all to work on too.
No, you're right. We talk about that all the time. Having that healthy conflict, you need that. Again, that's going to bring out the best ideas, because people are going to feel okay with, okay, I'm going to bring this up, and it's okay to disagree, but at least we'll discuss it. We'll figure out whether it's good or not. But I can bring up things, and I won't have to worry about being called dumb or stupid for having that idea. But rather, that's a great idea, but I don't know if it works with this. So just being able to tone it down to make it respectable for everybody so that they can participate. Because you're right, that's how we get the best.
we've got a couple minutes left. Dr. Katherine Adamson, what are your final thoughts on the topic of exploring or exploring the topic or sharing the topic of women in business?
Yeah, I think one, I do think women need to learn how to leverage their voice in a way that can be heard. So that means speaking up, that means adjusting to the scenario and the situation. But to try to get to be heard, not just to kind of give up, but to kind of work through it so you're heard. And it does take a little fight, right? But that's worth it. Um, but in that fight, kind of it's not women against men, kind of what we were just
Right.
talking about. I don't think that's accurate. I think it's women with men, men with women. How do we grow together? So I think we can't lose sight of what we were just talking about, the value of contribution and of partnering and finding male partners or advocates is maybe a better
Yep.
word.
Yep.
Advocates. Partners isn't the right word, but you know what I mean. Advocates in the workspace to support you as well. So, kind of give and take, working together, I think is very critical. And then just finding ways, I think, to encourage other women. So women encouraging women, I think, is very important. Sometimes women also get sucked into like this other subconscious thought process. Women are sometimes more critical of women than men are. And so how do we adjust that perception as well? So those are maybe some of my closing thoughts.
That's great. Very much appreciated. Joe, what final thoughts do you have?
I was just going to piggyback or just jump on some of the things that Dr. Catherine said, and that mainly was the piece with finding men that support and advocate and are allies for women because they are out there. I know I have a couple of women that I mentor today just because I know that they need a little more help because again they're not viewed as equal a lot of times. So I'm trying to give as much support as I can. So I think that's huge. The more we can do that, help them gain their voice, then more women will gain their voice as well. So I think that's huge. Just finding men that'll assist them and be an advocate. I think that's important.
I couldn't say it better. I'm not going to add to that because I feel like I'd only diminish it. So, with that, thank you very much, Dr. Katherine Adamson, for being a special guest on the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your personal, professional, and career development podcast. Um, Again, can't thank you enough. Thank you again to our viewers and listeners. If you liked what you heard, or if you feel that you know someone that could benefit, please give us a like, give us a share, give us a comment. We love the feedback and support that you've been giving us over the last couple of years. And with that, we'll close out our show. And we want to thank you and just want you to keep on being your not so ordinary you.